Andrew getting this matchup, he has to feel really good about it.
Has to feel pretty good about it indeed, as both players are ready to rock and roll. So let's jump on down to the match and see how this shakes out. So they've got to count themselves a little unlucky. The players on the Gabzan list, as it's been affectionately coined by Gab Nassif himself, to encounter this Dimir control list, which is a one-of in this tournament. Like, what do you think Andrew Cuneo saw in this color pairing?
I think some of the players coming into this tournament were trying to theorize what's the way to get an edge in the Jund matchup, as well as get an edge against some of the Collected Company decks and the Control decks. Now, against Collected Company and against Jund, the card Shadow's Verdict is a particularly powerful sweeper just because it's essentially a direct counter to Collected Company. Company puts creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less onto the battlefield. Shadow's Verdict exiles all creatures that cost 3 or less. So it's a card that lined up well against what the field was doing, exiling pesky cats, that sort of thing, and trying to find a shell for it. Well, Dimir Control is a good one. You get to have counter spells, you get to try to disrupt using some early discard, have access to Thoughtseize for the control matchups, go over top of them, and then have access to that Shadow's Verdict.
Those are cards that Cuneo will love to find a little later on, but we do see one of the haymakers in hand for him in Sublime Epiphany, which just absolutely wrecked yesterday. Does have to deal with this 4/3 Knight of Autumn down on the battlefield, which is typically not a card you see getting its aggro on. But I kind of like Shahar's method here. Just try and get Cuneo dead as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's really the only option he has available to him. And right now, this game plan doesn't actually look that bad. Cuneo's hand not doing much. There's nothing in the graveyard for him to even try to cycle this Cling to Dust off of, though Cuneo can fix that thanks to cycling one of these Fetid pools and putting something in there. This is an awkward start that Cuneo can turn around pretty easily from here on, considering the only pressure that Shahar has mounted up to this point is just the Knight of Autumn.
Couple cycles there, a couple lands of the top. Did find Shark Typhoon, so we'll be able to get a blocker in there if needs be, but it would just be chumping. Here comes the 4/3. Doesn't go for the Shark, and will likely do something on the end step here.
Yeah, Cuneo likely in the market to use this Saw It Coming that he has. Maybe doesn't care about this Kaya, might want to be saving it for something like that Yorian, and instead just cycling one or two Fetid pools as he has available to him in his hand right now. Could lead off with a cycle before deciding whether he needs to use the counterspell here or just let the Planeswalker resolve and cycle again.
Besides, Kaya needs to be countered, so Sword Coming is deployed. No more Planeswalker for Shahar. Is going to play the Overgrown Tomb tapped and pass the turn. Search for his Kanta is the pickup off the top of the library here for Cuneo.
Yeah, he has access to a Cycle Shark Typhoon 4/3 now,
Mm-hmm.
which would be able to trade with this Knight of Autumn. But unfortunately, that would give Shahar the go-ahead to resolve this Yorian as a 4/5 flyer, blink this Oath of Kaya and Wall of Blossoms, not only netting another card, but dealing 3 more damage to Cuneo and putting him at a very important 4 life, considering that's how much Yorian would be attacking for the next turn.
Cuneo will have access to Sublime Epiphany. It's not great just using it to bounce. You know, you'd love to get the, I don't know, was it 5-for-1 with that card? Just all the different modes on it, but, you know, it can keep him alive, at least for a turn.
It can keep him alive for a turn, but right now that's likely not going to be good enough. He doesn't have the torrential Gear Hulk that you're really looking for with the Epiphany to start that insane Gear Hulk chain and get a lot of value out of a single copy. It, it it'll again keep him alive, but he's treading water right now, and
Yeah.
it could be his position. You don't want to give up a game in this great matchup for yourself.
Certainly not. So things have gotten off to a very good start here from the two-time world champion Shahar Shenhar, trying to prove all of us wrong in picking up a victory here against a 10% matchup.
Yeah, I mean, Magic is a game where, as good as a matchup can be, the stats can always just be wrong given the draws in an isolated instance. And here, Andrew Cuneo, he's looking like he's going to lose game one unless he can string together a series of draws starting with this Sublime Epiphany.
All his hopes rest on that powerful card, so let's see what Shahar does here. Moves to combat, in goes the big old Sky Noodle. And here we'll see the Fabled Passage in response. And Sublime Epiphany will get some things done here. Oh, we're going for a cycle. Interesting.
I think that may put enough cards in the graveyard for
Ah,
Andrew to just use Cling to Dust here, which is actually what he's going to do, and
okay.
gain 3 life from the Knight of Autumn in Shahar's graveyard, and ensure he doesn't have to use this Epiphany quite yet. I think this is really good line from him to make sure that he's not exposing himself further to this potential Yorion.
Very nice indeed. So down to 3 goes. Now, blinking Yorion would be a bad idea, considering that there's an Oath of Kai on the battlefield. But we do have the companion Yorion, who wants to get in on the action next turn, perhaps, for Shahar.
This is still rough for Andrew, though.
Oh, yes.
I
Oh, yeah, that's not going to do it, unfortunately. Looks like this is Shahar's game. No counterspell. Well, we do have the Sublime Epiphany, but how do we deal with the creatures on the battlefield? That's the question here for Andrew Cuneo.
You don't deal with 2, unfortunately. That is the big problem right now. You can cycle a Shark Typhoon for 1, but Andrew's graveyard is empty. So what he really needs to do is cycle Shark Typhoon for a 1-drop and hope he finds some removal spell. Unfortunately, even if he manages to do that, he will still have the threat of the secondary Yorion in hand from Shahar to blink this Oath of Kaya for the last 3 points of damage he needs.
He's really hanging on for dear life here, is Andrew Cuneo, as Shahar Shenhar presents lethal on board. Shark Typhoon cycle for 1. There's a Torrential Gearhulk, but
That's game.
unable to cast it, so that is going to be game
Look
there.
at
Look
Shahar.
at Shahar. He
He's
doesn't
gotten
believe
away
it.
with it. He knows
Yeah.
it.
Well, Mr. Luck himself, luck out in this matchup against Andrew Cuneo. We'll have to wait and see how the next game unfolds. But taking a look at the sideboard here, what does Cuneo have to do to beat Shahar Shenhar?
He gets to warp his deck quite a bit just to make sure that he has the answers he wants for this matchup. We see full 4 copies of Fatal Push postboard. He only had 3 in the main deck. Really powerful card against what essentially won Shahar that game, which was a Knight of Autumn question mark. We do see those shifting Ceratops come in from Shahar's side, so a few more pesky threats, but again, Fatal Push, if you can get the Revolt trigger on it, will deal with shifting Ceratops as well. So that's the big goal. We also see a copy of Languish coming in, again, trying to deal with creatures that have less than 1 toughness. On Andrew, we see a Shark Typhoon coming in and going out, so a little neutral sideboarding there, but mix things up a bit.
Oh man, I'm just remembering that brutal Fatal Push turn yesterday. 2 shifting Ceratops down on the battlefield for Luis and just pushed right out of there. Both of them back to back. That had to hurt. So certainly a very good answer for the uncounterable dinosaur as we get things going here in game number 2.
All right, Andrew keeps a 2-lander with a Mind Stone. Shahar has a Thoughtseize to potentially take the Mind Stone, but unfortunately his only black source comes into play tapped, so won't have the window to take the Mind Stone before Andrew can resolve it. But this is a pretty good hand from Shahar, and there's no pushes over there, there's no Languish, there's nothing to deal with a shifting Ceratops that currently sit.
Mind Stone gets to resolve. And a Temple Garden drawn off the top. Thoughtseize is going to take a squiz in the hand here of Andrew Cuneo. What would you take?
I would probably be looking at either the Narset or the Torrential Gearhulk. Those are the cards that could pose the biggest threats here. Trying to make this hand awkward isn't really going to work considering these Shark Typhoons can cycle, and Shahar may be looking to do something like a Necromentia on Shark Typhoon in the next few turns if he's able to draw the second black source that he's looking for. So stranding Andrew with 2 cards that he can turn into zombies that he'll have no problem dealing with is a pretty tempting proposition from his point of view.
So, Narset Partra Veils. Into the graveyard she goes. Shark Typhoons get to hang around here for Andrew Cuneo. Needs to find a mana source, but does have, like you mentioned, a couple cyclers as well as Behold the Multiverse to go digging into the library.
Really good draw from Shahar there. Knight of Autumn going to
Oh,
deal
yeah.
with this Mind Stone. You see his eyebrows go up. Shahar is seeing a route to victory right now. Andrew's missing land drops, and Shahar has a shifting Ceratops that there's no answer for as far as he knows.
Oh, boy. Oh, hey, did you need this? Sorry, accidentally blew it up. My
Did I
bad.
do that?
Oopsies. Did find 2 lands off the top, though, so that's pretty neat indeed.
Yeah, that's what Andrew needed. That's a good start. We did see him consider going for something, maybe a cycle last turn. Uh, Thoughtseize for Shahar now. We may be seeing the 10% here, Haley.
We might be. I think the desk might go down in this round altogether. We'll have to
Certainly
see how
too
this
early to
shakes
call
out.
it at the moment.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've seen Dimir control, or just any control deck, get down to bare bones life totals and come back from almost unwinnable situations. So it's never over
Yeah, this Knight
until
of
the
Autumn
life total
can't
hits
attack.
0.
There's a 1/1 shark that is about to get made as a blocker regardless. And now Andrew has his mana. There's a fatal push. Okay, I'm gonna walk back that 10% statement. Andrew's back in this game firmly, and now he has Vraska's Contempt, fatal push. Shahar trying to clear the way, but there's too much there. Andrew likely going to just let this, I think, resolve. He could consider casting Behold the Multiverse in response, but I think in his position, he's got enough cards where if Shahar decides to take Behold, Andrew's okay with that. He has a Gear Hulk to flash it back later. He wants to leave up this Vraska's Contempt and or Fatal Push against the board of creatures that are being presented.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because with Torrential Gear Hulk staying in hand, if that's what remains, it can just be cast and cost whatever's in the graveyard at a later stage. So he's going to have to find an answer for that very quickly too.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Shahar actually uh, just play Shifting Ceratops here and essentially try to overload Andrew in terms of threats that he's presenting.
Looks like that's exactly what he's going to go for here. Is Shifting Ceratops hits the stack, hits the battlefield. And in response, Andrew Cuneo is going to fire off the Behold the Multiverse.
Yeah, no attack from the Yasharn there. There is only a 1/1 shark on Andrew's side of the battlefield, so just a little playing it safe. You don't want to give Andrew the ability to get that revolt trigger and use that
Mhm.
fatal push at the moment because he's not showing another way to activate it.
Yeah, no fabled passages or anything like that. So really relying on the shark dying to get fatal push, to get the revolt trigger to trigger.
Yeah, now Shahar does have a line available to him to cast Necromention, naming Torrential Gearhawk before those are online for Andrew. That is one of the primary cards Andrew uses to finish out the game. The other one being those Shark Typhoons. He's already used one, and I believe there should only be two or three here in the post-board games, considering we saw him doing a little dance swapping them around. So I think for Shahar, it is a very real consideration to go Necromentia just naming Torrential Gearhulk.
Well, first things first, we're going to see a 5/4 shark. Excuse me, shark. That's not a shark. That's a dinosaur. 5/4 dinosaur swinging in there. Can't be blocked by the blue shark. And Necromentia is going to get to work on potentially, most likely, the Torrential Gear Hulk.
The reason you see Shahar doing this post combat is he knows there is a copy of the card in Andrew's hand. If he did it before, Andrew would be getting a black zombie that can block the Ceratops through the protection from blue. And once that happens, that would turn on the fatal push again,
Mm-hmm.
allowing Andrew to use his mana profitably here to get rid of the protection from blue threat on the other side of the battlefield.
So Torrential Gear Hulk is named with Necromentia, sending the copies away into exile and creating a 2/2 black zombie for the one that's in hand.
Ailey, I'm
It's
going to be
also a very
honest.
sneaky way to have a look and see what's left in the library, isn't it?
Yeah, Shahar is getting a full look at how Andrew sideboarded. He's making note because the players have access to lists. He knows what he has to play around because it may be a reasonable option from Shahar to try to play a sort of decking plan. Now we know that Andrew has access to commit to memory in his deck as a singleton copy, so eventually he may be able to work the game into a state where he can just essentially reset, draw 7 cards to shuffle everything back in, and then have the tools to win. But at the moment, Shahar just needs to know what he's trying to play around.
For sure. Search for Azcanta flips into Azcanta the Sunken Rune and will now help Andrew Cuneo dig through his library. A Mythos of Nethroid drawn off the top here for Shahar. Can that hit any permanent?
I believe it is non-land. It is
Ah,
not a
drat.
Vindicate at its core, but it is still quite powerful in terms of dealing with something like that Maze Mind Tome if it were to
Mm-hmm.
ever come down. For Andrew, we did see him just sitting back on it and instead leaving up 2 counter spells as well as this Fatal Push and potential Shark Typhoon.
So the two big creatures are going to swing in here, try and push through as much damage. Andrew Cuneo, still with that Fatal Push in hand, will be quite keen to use it here potentially, unless he suspects shenanigans from Shahar Shenhar.
It looks like he wants to just use this zombie as a chump blocker, not take 4 damage, enable his revolted fatal push to get rid of this shifting Ceratops. The reason to keep the 1/1 shark there is a card like Yorion that we see sitting in Shahar's hand. Andrew doesn't want to essentially leave himself with only ground blockers and then have
Mm-hmm.
Shahar just play a Yorion that starts attacking in the sky. So having a 1/1 not that much worse than a 2/2, and he's planning on getting rid of the Ceratops anyways, so it shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, going for the Oath of Kaya there, that gets negated. Andrew Cuneo recognizing that its ability to deal 3 damage to face could be quite devastating considering that there is a Yorion in hand. The Fatal Push eventually gets rid of a creature on the board, and it's the shifting Ceratops that goes to the graveyard, leaving behind Yasharn and the Knight of Autumn.
Yeah, Andrew isn't able to use this Canta anymore because he had to play that Fatal Push there. So I
Mm-hmm.
do like him being efficient with his mana and just making a 1/1 Shark here. He doesn't want to get put in a position where double removal spell next turn through this Sod coming could put him in an awkward position where he's out of blockers and just facing down lethal damage from a Yasharn plus Knight of Autumn. This way he gets to untap, have Sod coming up, and still have the access to a Scanta the Sunken Ruin. So I think Andrew is just really making sure to play this game as safely as possible, considering he is in a precarious position on the back foot right now.
Now, the Knight of Autumn is the draw here for Shahar, so finding plenty of action. Does also have the Castle Lochthwain on the battlefield to go digging for some more cards when he needs to, but at this point, he's just quite happy to keep applying pressure and make Andrew Cuneo have an answer.
Yeah, Andrew gets to start off with his Canta here. Notably, the Castle Lochthwain Shard does still need 1 more black source before he starts activating it, so at least for Cuneo, he knows that at the moment, Shahar can't play that pass game while trying to refill on card advantage. Shahar will need to act, but Andrew is slowly stabilizing, still needs something like a Languish, and is in a position where if he finds nothing in this next turn cycle, he could just lose to this board. So definitely at least needs to counter this Yorion, and then has to hope that he finds something off the top in one of essentially 3 draws.
It's a Fabled Passage, not what he'd like to see. Maze Mind Tome can join the battlefield here and help out, but first thing we're going to go to is a Censor. Cycle that away, find another Censor.
Getting scary.
Can he cycle into a Languish?
He can cycle into
Shahar.
Languish. Fabled Passage now enables a Revolted Fatal Push if he finds that off of Escanta, but this is his last chance. If he finds nothing here, the game is over.
Oh,
The game is over.
that is the game over. Shahar Shenhar does the impossible, you would have thought, and wins against the Dimir control deck.